This is one of our favorite events. It's our annual summer reading kickoff with our author event this year this summer featuring Kristen Higgins. I couldn't be more excited. It's a special night. Normally we do this in the library and there's wine and cheese and food from local restaurants. Instead, you can have it in your own home and hopefully you prepared a feast for yourself. But we are asking that you think about becoming a member of the Friends or donating to the Friends during this time, because they are the ones who underwrite all of our programs. They are a special group, and I don't think that most people understand that they donate over 14,000 hours in volunteer time in the course of a year. That is mainly having to do with our used bookshop and putting all those books together, but it is helping out at programs such as this, finding fantastic authors such as Kristen, and without them, we wouldn't be the library that we are. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Denise Marcel, who actually is on the author committee, helps us find all these wonderful authors. So take it over, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome to our first virtual author series tonight. And this is also the kickoff of the library's summer reading program. And as Alice mentioned, for those of you who usually have been with us previously, you know that we serve wine and appetizers. And we do charge a modest $15 fee, which is the Friends' way of raising money for these programs, and this program as well as others. And but with this virtual event, of course, it's free. So we would, as Alice said, we'd be grateful for a donation. And you'll see in the chat box that there's a link for how and where you can donate. And you'll also see in the chat box that you can buy the book from Elm Street Books. And you can always The Last to Know. And again, if you've been with us, you know that Elm Street has always supported us and is there in person, but it's a virtual world now, so we hope you'll support them. And finally tonight, Kristen, after Kristen speaks, we will take questions from you. So think about it, or put, even during while she's speaking, if she says something, jot something in the chat box. So tonight, although I can't pour wine for you as the board, just imagine that I am pouring you a virtual glass of the best wine you've ever had, and that while you're listening to Kristen Higgins. So Kristen is a New York Times bestselling author, not only New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and Publishers Weekly best-selling author of 19 novels that have been translated into more than 24 languages and have sold millions of copies. And her books have received many, dozens of awards, great accolades, fabulous reviews, including starred reviews in Kirkus and Publishers Weekly and the New York Journal of Books and Library Journal and People and Book Lists. And her books are also regularly on the list of best books of the year. And in fact, very recently, last week or two, People magazine named Always The Last to Know Best Book of the Week. So we have like one of the hottest authors here with us tonight. Besides writing, she also has her own podcast that she co-hosts with her friend and fellow writer, Josh Day. It's called the Crappy Friends podcast, and it discusses the dynamics of female relationships and friendships. And Kristen lives in Connecticut with her heroic firefighter husband. So welcome to the Friends of the Ferguson, our author series, and we are delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. as a Connecticut native, third generation, I'm always happy to help a local library, and I am actually a member of the Friends of my own local library, so I know how much you guys do for your library, and how so many of the extra programs and events are hosted by the Friends. So absolutely, if you're listening, become a friend or donate to the Friends. And yes, I'm here to talk about my 20th novel, Always the Last to Know, which was, as Denise said, People Magazine's Book of the Week, and got a starter review from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly. So I love to write about family dramas, and this family, I think, is everybody's family in some respects. It focuses on the three Frost women, the mom, Barb, and her two grown daughters, Juliet and Sadie. And the kickoff event, if you will, is that John, the husband and father of the girls, has a massive stroke, and he's rushed into surgery. And while his wife of almost 50 years is sitting there in shock, wondering how he's going to be, holding all his stuff, his phone lights up with a text, and she finds out this way that he's been having an affair. And to add insult to injury, she was just about to ask him for a divorce. So now she has this new normal of a sick husband whose recovery is very uncertain, and her two daughters coming home. Sadie has lived away for 12 years, and she's kind of dad's favorite, and she rushes to take care of her dad. And the older daughter, Juliet, is sort of wondering, like, what is the best outcome here if dad is not going to recover? Poor mom has so much on her plate already. So each of the women is going through a lot already, and then this happens. Barb's in this lackluster marriage that has taken 40 years to kind of erode to the point where she and her husband are just two people who live in the same house, really. Juliet, who's the older daughter by 12 years, she is in the midst of sort of a midlife crisis where she's done everything. She's had a plan. She checked every box. She went to Harvard. She went to Yale. She became an architect. She married a wonderful guy, and she has two kids. And she's really struggling with the pressures of having it all, of being a great architect, having a happy marriage, raising two teenage girls, which can always be a challenge, and really wondering if she can keep it going, if she can keep all these balls in the air. And then Sadie, who's the more free-spirited younger sister, she's been trying to make it as an artist in New York City, and she's sort of compromised on her art with a capital A. She teaches elementary school, and she has a job with an interior decorator where she makes paintings to match furniture. She calls them couch paintings. So the designer will give her like a swatch of fabric and say, can you make something Van Gogh-ish with this, but in purple and pink or whatever. So she leaves New York to come back to take care of her beloved dad. And she also has to deal with the love of her life, Noah, who she dated since high school, and never doubted her love for him or his love for her, but they never were able to compromise enough so that their relationship could work. And now she's in town and running into Noah, and has just learned that he's a new dad. So I think it's a story that will resonate with just about every woman. I think you'll see yourself in Barb and Juliet and Sadie. And, it's a story of marriage, of how to keep a good one, and how marriage can erode over the years in all these little ways, when marriage doesn't work, how messy families are. There's a lot of dynamics about parental favorites and having the same parents, but having very different childhoods, because of the age difference between the daughters. And it's a story about finding out what is really important in life, and where you do compromise and where you do ask for help. And if you have read my other books, you'll know that they're funny, they're very emotional. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll laugh again, and I think it's a great book. I write my books about a year in advance of their coming out, so I had no idea what this year was going to look like. Nobody did, right? But we live in uncertain times. We've got COVID. We see examples of police brutality and rioting and protesting, and I think we really need to read books that have a joyful, uplifting message that says these characters are going to go through really hard times, and they're going to have to deal with difficult circumstances, and they're going to have to look at themselves, and that they're going to grow and change for the better. And when they come out on the other end of this, not only are they going to be okay, they will be better than they've ever been. And I hope that's what's going to happen to the world. I'm very much an optimist. I hope that's what will happen in our society, and I hope that that people who read this book will get that really uplifted feeling of, we're going to be okay. We're going to be just fine. I see a question from Arpita, and she says, who was your favorite character in this book? Yeah, by the way, I'm very chatty. I would love to hear your questions. I'm thrilled if you're going to get the book from the library or support Elm Street Books in New Canaan. Your local independent bookstore needs you these days. So go out and buy some books. Try to imagine your life without a little bookstore in your community. It's horrible, right? So support your bookstores and go to the library once it opens again. But yes, I would absolutely take your questions. So Arpita said, who was your favorite character in this book? So the story is told from all three perspectives, from Barb, Juliet, and Sadie. It also has the perspective of John, the husband who's had this stroke. And I have to say that was very interesting to write as an author, to write someone who has suffered some brain damage by his stroke, who's nonverbal, who's grasping for the right words and feelings. And I really loved writing his perspective. He's a horrible husband. He cheats on his wife of many decades, and they're both unhappy in the marriage, but Barb is willing to do it right and get a divorce and not sneak around. He's been sneaking around. The texts that he has with his girlfriend are really nauseating and hilarious. He's basically gone back to adolescence at the age of 75. But I loved writing his perspective because it was so different. Is he my favorite character in the book? I'm not really sure. I would say Sadie is so fun in this book. She's sort of the less responsible younger sister. Exceptions were made for her in that she has older parents. Her father's very indulgent with her. She's allowed to get B's and C's in school and kind of float around like a butterfly, and yet she's very exuberant. She's very funny. She's very welcoming, at ease with herself. So I think she was my favorite character in the story. And there's a lot of secondary characters, the mom's best friend, Caro, or a classmate named Mickey, who is now the mother of Noah's child. It's very much a story about like a modern family and how that looks. It's not, you know, two parents who stayed together, you know, it's sort of like that blended family, the family bush rather than the family tree. So, so I really enjoyed writing some of those. Melissa has a question. You have the book set in Stoningham. Was it really referring to Stonington? The descriptions and of course the reference to Water Street lead me to think that. Yes, very, very well done. It is Stonington, but I fictionalize my towns, even though all of them are based on real places. I fictionalize them so I can play with the geography a little bit. So if I need there to be an island off the coast, then there's an island off the coast. Or if there's a cemetery in the middle of town, I can put the cemetery in the middle of town. But yeah, I mean, Stonington is one of the prettiest towns in Connecticut. And I remember taking my daughter and her friend there for a day and just thinking, I want to set a book here. You know, I'm not sure what book or what the story is going to be, but I love this setting. And setting plays a big role in all my towns. I'm sorry, in all my stories. Stoningham is a beautiful Connecticut town, much like, you know, down in your neck of the woods and in the Fairfield County area, New Canaan, Westport, Greenwich. This lovely little town where there are beautiful old houses and a town green and an old stone library. And for Barb, there's this real sense of belonging in Stoningham. She came from rural Minnesota and worked in Providence. That's where she met her husband. And when she comes to Stoningham, she feels like this is where I'm meant to be. This is where I'm meant to raise my children. And I wrote another book, Life and Other Inconveniences, that was the first book set in Stoningham. So that was last summer's book. So if you read that book, you'll see little references to some of the characters from there. Let's see.
I could ask a question.
Thank you, yes.
Someone else asked about your favorite characters. What I notice is that you create characters that are imperfect. Some of them make some big mistakes, but nevertheless, they remain sympathetic. The reader can still root for them, to really care about them. How do you do that? How do you create those rounded characters?
That's a wonderful question. I think that I never want to write about a perfect character who's always right, always confident, never makes a misstep, because that's, for one, it's not realistic. I think we all go through times in our life when we question and we worry and we think, I should have and I didn't, or, you know, I was afraid to, or I am afraid to. So I think those are what make us interesting as people, are those moments and those questions, those flaws. In a novel, you want your characters to overcome that, to be, you know, for me, these characters are role models, so that you can say, you know, I can see myself in Barb or Juliet, and I know that I have to let some things go or open my heart up a little bit or be a little bit more compassionate, whatever the case may be. So I want the characters to be flawed, and I want them to honestly address that during the course of the book. And that's one of the reasons writing is so satisfying, is because you can do that in a novel and you might not get to see that in real life, you know. So great question.
All right, so I have another question. Now that dolphin rescue scene, that seems too realistic and just too wild to, completely create. I don't know. Have you ever rescued a dolphin?
Why, yes, I have. So I was writing this book in a panic last winter because I had all these crazy ideas for what the book should be and what was going to happen. And it was just a hot mess. So I came up to Cape Cod and I rented a little house on the ocean. And I thought, I'm going to stay here for a month and I'm going to finish this book, come hell or high water. And the high water came. We had this wild storm and I took my dog out for a walk and he started quivering and trembling. And all of a sudden we saw a baby dolphin on the sand, and the waves had pushed it up on the shore and it was trying to get back. and the waves were too big for it to get back. And there was one other man on the beach, and he had a Red Sox cap on, and he said, you know, I'll call my wife, but there's no cell service here. And his wife was going to call animal rescue, but in the meantime, we oh, I'm sorry, my husband's calling me. Isn't that sweet? Sorry, not now, darling. So anyway, there he is again, a persistent guy. And my daughter's going to tell him not to call me again. Sorry about that. So anyway, back to my little dolphin. I picked her up in my arms and like staggered towards the water, got knocked down by a wave. It was February, it was freezing cold. In the end, the marine rescue people came and they took her on a blanket and they got her back into the water. But it was so exciting. And Ivan was my friend with the Red Sox cap on. And even though I'm a Yankees fan, he was a very nice man. And I was soaking wet. My dog was soaking wet. I was covered in sand and salt water. And I had this big winter parka on that was soaking wet. And he ended up giving me a ride home because I had ridden my bike to the beach of all days. And we were just so exhilarated. We're like, wow, how many people get to touch a dolphin, and help a baby dolphin? We were like bonded for life, So yeah, I did get that opportunity. And I tell you, as bucket list items go, that was a great one, saving a baby dolphin. I highly recommend it.
And you wrote about it so effectively.
Thank you.
Barb?
I have a couple of questions from our viewers. And I guess first I wanted to mention that with the dolphin story, which seemed so unreal, that clearly you gather some things clearly from your experiences and maybe a little eavesdropping. I get that impression with the kind of characters that you build. But we have a question about your writing process from Jamie. She's wondering, do you write to an ending? Do you let it carry you along? And that's also echoed by Marlene, who wants to know, does it just develop as you write?
But I've written 20 novels and each one has been a very different experience. I don't have a formula. I wish I did, because it's hard to write a book. It's very intimidating to start writing a book and you think, my books are sometimes 400 plus pages long, and I think, you write 3 pages and you think, I only have 427 to go, So I try to have a grand scheme of things, that this will be a book about the 3 Frost women dealing with this crisis and the realizations that they'll have along the way. And I try to write in their backstories. One thing I think is crucial as a writer is to really know the characters deeply. And you can start off thinking, oh, this will be sort of the flighty younger sister. But what you don't know is what a lovely relationship she has with her father, or how much she suffered growing up in her older sister's shadow, or, so I try to get everybody really nuanced and developed, and that's what takes the longest for me. That'll take I would say it takes me about 9 months to write a book, which is very, metaphoric. So it takes me about 6 months to really know where the story's headed. I know some of the big points. I didn't know about the dolphin thing because that happened while I was writing the book, but I went home and thought, I'm going to write a dolphin scene. So it's both like a plan, but also you have to let the book kind of take on a life of its own and let the characters really develop and grow, so that you don't have ridiculous things happening that are really out of character. You want them to grow and change for the better, but you don't want them to become different people, or you don't want something so crazy and outlandish to happen that the readers say, wait, what? That makes no sense. So my process is, to struggle and to procrastinate, research, I call it. So, yeah, it would be great if there was one way to write a book and we could all learn it, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
I guess to follow up on that, we have a question from Nancy who's wondering when you began writing fiction. Were you an English major in college?
I was an English major in college, but I started college off as a pre-med student, and that lasted about half a semester. I always thought I'd be a pediatrician, a pediatric surgeon especially, and I've written several doctor characters as a way to pretend that I am, I guess. But I changed to an English major because it was clear that I would not last for 8 years in, organic chemistry and math and stuff like that. I still have math anxiety dreams, as a matter of fact. So I became an English major. I got a job in public relations, writing, advertising, but I never really thought about writing a novel until my children were small. My daughter was in kindergarten and my son was in nursery school. And I was a stay-at-home mom and I loved that. And my husband is a firefighter, so of course he had another job too. And I thought, when the kids go to school, I'm going to have to do something to contribute to the family finances as much as I love, baking and gardening and stuff, and I can't have 8 hours a day where I do that while the kids are at school. So I was kind of weighing my options. I thought I could go back to the advertising agency, but there's the stress of working away from where your children are and trying to get home in time to meet the bus. And I thought, I don't really have a lot of other skills. I can waitress, I can bartend, I can clean houses, and I can read. I love to read. I love fiction. And I thought maybe I could write a book. And it was it was almost like a dare to myself, like maybe I could write a book. And I talked to my husband about it. And he said, well, you tell the kids great stories and, go for it, give it a try. And so I gave myself the deadline that when my son started first grade, I would have sold a book or I would go to waitressing or house cleaning. So I wrote a romantic comedy because I thought that would be fairly easy to sell. Because who doesn't like to read a romantic, funny book? And I was really lucky. It was, timing and hard work and luck. And I got an agent and I got a book deal. And that was 18 years ago when I started writing. So it was definitely a second career for me. I was 36 the first time I decided to write a book. So that's the wonderful thing about writing too, is that you don't age out. Like it's not like being a firefighter where, you think I'm too old to decide to be a firefighter at the age of 55. But you could be a writer whenever you want at any time. So if anyone out there is thinking about that, I say go for it.
Well, that's a good segue into a question we have from Faith. Who says you have a great sense of humor and you interweave it so well, even with serious matters. So how do you juggle the two at the same time?
Well, I love that compliment and I appreciate that, Faith. And I don't know. I think it's sort of an outlook on life. Things are funny, things are tragic, things are awkward. I think I have a good eye for what's funny and a good memory, which is really helpful when you're a writer. And I think that if you can make your readers cry, you can make them laugh. And, if you can touch them emotionally like that, if they can relate to your characters, relate to the situation enough, they can really enjoy the book so much more if they're right there with the characters. And I think laughter and humor are the different sides of the same coin. They're both like highlights of emotion. You're very sad or you're laughing really hard, and those are the times that you remember and the times that really resonate. So it's important to me as a person to have fun, and I think I'm funny. My husband thinks I'm a little less funny than I do, but my kids are both funny, and we just, I don't know, that's what makes life great, is the ability to laugh at yourself, I think.
You, we often like to ask authors, who are your favorite authors? Because you said you love to read.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So an English major. So who do you like to read?
Well, Harper Lee wrote the best book in American fiction with To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm not going to hold Go Set a Watchman against her, because, that was a first draft, and let's just keep her the author of To Kill a Mockingbird. I love the Brontes, but I read mostly living authors, and my favorites are, well, I'll talk about the books that I've read this past winter, because I've read so many great books. Jojo Moyes, who wrote The Peacock Emporium. She's more known for Me Before You, which was like a tragic love story, funny, tragic love story. I've read some great romantic women's fiction. The Boyfriend Project by Farah Rochon was fantastic. To me, that was like a modern day Jane Austen novel with, romance and friendship and family pressures and societal pressures. I thought it was brilliant. I read a lovely, warm-hearted book called Real Men Knit, about 4 adopted brothers who inherit a knitting store in Harlem. And that was just like such an outrageous premise for me. I loved that book. I'm reading right now Happy and You Know It by Laura Hankin, which is about a failed musician who becomes like she's like a musician to sing for babies in this rich Upper East Side mommies group in New York City, and that's really funny. Susan Elizabeth Phillips had a great book out a couple weeks ago called Dance Away With Me, and she's also someone who writes funny and emotional books. So I've just read. It's been such a strange time. For me, for an author, life isn't that much different in the pandemic. I work from home alone, and but the books that have walked beside me during this time, I was completely alone for about 6 weeks because my husband was exposed to COVID, and so he made me stay at our place on the Cape, and the books were like my friends who walked along with me and kept me company during the winter when it was cold and rainy up here. And as I said earlier, I think we need books now more than ever, especially ones with positive messages.
Another question I have about, you mentioned the romantic comedy, and in this book you write about different types of love. There's romantic love, friendship, parenthood, and can you talk about how you wrote about those and your choices, and particularly the idea that maybe one doesn't end up with the greatest love of their life, the most romantic love of their life, but it's still happy?
Yeah, that was, as you mentioned in my intro, I have a podcast called Crappy Friends that I do very casually with my best friend, Joss Day. And we talk about the intricacies of female friendships. We said the good, the bad, the ugly. And in Barb's case, in this story, she has, she loved her husband in the beginning, but the real love of her life is her daughter, Juliet. And then she tries really hard with Sadie 12 years later, but she has postpartum depression and it's not diagnosed. And Sadie's a more difficult child and kind of daddy's favorite, and what Barb finds out is that maybe the love of her life is going to be her friend, her best friend who's stood by her. And she says a couple times during the book, I might not have had the greatest husband, but I sure have a great friend. And I loved that idea that, friendship is just as important as romantic love, sometimes more so. With Juliet, she's in a very happy marriage, but she's so afraid that it's going to fall apart that she's almost sabotaging it, and she has 2 daughters as well, and she loved her daughters so much until they hit puberty, and now she's questioning herself, like, am I as good a mother as mine was? Could I be better? What am I not doing? And for Sadie and Noah, there's this first love that was so powerful and so special, but they wanted such different things in life, and each was unable to compromise to the degree to which the other wanted them to. And so that's a question too, is like, how much do you change the course of your life for one person? How much should you? And where is a happy medium? So, and then the love between the sisters. This is a pair of sisters who's not super close. And I really enjoyed writing that because, not everybody has a best friend sister like I do. I'm very lucky in that respect. But I wanted to write about sisters, who become closer. And I think in so many families, you think of your sister as she was when she was 11 or something, you paint them in that corner, put them in that box. And as you spend more and more time in your adult life, you start to see a more complete picture. And that happens with these sisters, and they're able to really admit they enjoy each other more, and they respect each other more as the book goes on. So yeah, it's definitely a story about the different kinds of love and how they're all needed. You can't just have one person to hang all your hopes and dreams on, whether it's that one child or that one romantic love, that it takes more than that to make a full life.
We have a number of questions. I'm going to combine 2 because I know we're getting near the end of our time here. I'm going to combine Rachel and Alexa. I think they're similar enough. So do you ever learn from your characters, thinking, I would never react like this, but maybe my character would? And then Alexa is saying that one of her favorite characters of all times is Malone from Catch of the Day. And she wants to know, do you ever think back on past characters and wonder where they would be today?
Those are both wonderful questions. I definitely learn from my characters, and I think writing has made me a better person, because you, as a writer, you spend time in that moment with the character, and that moment goes on longer than it does in real life. So, for example, in this book, there's, Sadie has always viewed her mother as the sort of lesser parent. She just adored her father. They were similar in personality. He seemed to enjoy her more. And she's always kind of, thinking about what her mother isn't. And she has this moment where she remembers being sick and her mom taking care of her. And in her mind, she starts to say, but I knew that it was a real inconvenience for me to come home from school. And then she's like, no, she came through. She always came through. And it's about time that I started giving her credit for that. And I think, like, because I spent all this time in that scene with Sadie, you can see that, like, maybe your first human instinct is to say, yeah, but it wasn't all that great. Or, I never forget the look on her face when she did that. And Sadie's able to think more positively and to change. And I think, I need to do that more too, not just look at what's not there, but look at what was or what is. As far as wondering about my past characters, in particular, Malone is one of the exceptions to the rule. Yes, Malone got written into another book, Somebody to Love, where he gets almost like a sequel through the eyes of another character. But in general, I don't. these characters start off away and you put them through all these struggles and challenges and moments and scenes. And at the end of the book, they are better, and they're more confident and more compassionate. They're more open. You've made them better. They did it, and you leave them happy. So I don't want to go back to them and mess them up and give them like another challenge or conflict to overcome. I know that they got to that point where they're going to take on the rest of their lives and take it on well. So I don't look back and say, like, I wonder, how many kids Faith and Levi have now or something like that. I know that they're doing just great. And I think when readers ask you for more of that, what they really want is like a Christmas card from the characters, to know that they're doing great, that they got another dog and had another baby or whatever, and just that sort of reassurance that they lasted. And I can tell you that they did. And they're doing just great. But no, I forget about them to the point where sometimes I forget their names, because, as I said, I've been writing for 18 years and my characters each have like 60 or 70 named characters in the story. And sometimes people will say, like, oh, James was my favorite. And I'll think, James, who was James again? Because it's been, 8 or 10 years since I wrote that book. And then I remember, of course. But they're like the nieces and nephews that you sent off to college. They're doing well. They'll send you a postcard once in a while.
So we wanted to relay to you a note from one of our friends, board members, and she's letting us know, in anticipation of tonight, she read Life and Other Inconveniences and loved it, especially the development of the characters. And she says, I am truly looking forward to your new novel, and also look forward to experiencing your podcast. Thank you for some levity during this challenging time. I think many of us can echo those sentiments.
Thank you so much. That's lovely.
So Denise?
Really...
maybe to wrap up, we've had a question or request to, would you read from the book? And what do you think about reading from the first page?
Sure, I'll read the first page, which I know is from Sadie's perspective. So the younger sister, and it opens with her saying, "You're engaged? Oh, huzzah!" Yes, I had just said huzzah. You know what? I couldn't blame myself. Another engagement among the teachers of St. Catherine's Catholic Elementary School in the Bronx, the 5th this year. And yes, I was counting. I couldn't look away from the diamond blinding me from the finger of Bridget Ennis. The stone was the size of a bumblebee, and my hypnotized eyes followed her hand as she waved it in excitement, telling the rest of us teachers, 6 women, 1 man, about how romantic, how unexpected, how thrilling it had been. I had nothing against Bridget. I even liked her. I'd mentored her because this was her first year teaching. She was 23 as of last week. I was ancient at 32, or so it felt in the teacher years. It had been raining diamond rings, and despite my having had bubbly hopes on my own last birthday, the 4th finger of my left hand remained naked. Bridget was talking about the save-the-date magnets and paper quality and color schemes and flower arrangements and the 79 dresses she was already torn between. Another woman falling victim to wedding insanity. Bridget was the only child of wealthy parents. This did not bode well for me, her sort of friend. Was it too late to distance myself? Please don't ask me to be a bridesmaid. Please, please, I am way too old for this. My daddy said whatever I want, and I want it to be perfect, Bridget looked at me, and I felt the cold trickle of dread. Sadie, obviously I want you as a bridesmaid. Her pure green eyes filled with happy tears. Of course, I said. Thank you. Wow, what an honor. My cheek began to twitch as I smiled. So there you go. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This has just been fabulous.
That's so nice.
Delightful. It's if you're right in the room with us. really.
Thank you. I hope to come for the wine and cheese another year.
Absolutely, you will. Oh, we would love to have you back.
Thank you so much. It was lovely. And don't forget, support your local library, support your local bookstore. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Night, everyone.